They stood there, certain they had won. The room had tilted in their favor, laughter landing where respect used to sit. Every eye waited for me to flinch, to explain, to collapse under the weight of what they'd just done. I felt the heat of humiliation crawl up my spine. And then something unexpected happened. I stayed still. I let them finish. And in that pause, everything quietly changed. For a long time, I believed that dignity was something you defended out loud. If someone crossed a line, you corrected them. If they misrepresented you, you clarified. If they humiliated you, you reclaimed your name immediately. That belief had shaped how I moved through relationships, rooms, and unspoken hierarchies. I thought silence meant surrender, that composure looked too much like consent. But there are environments where reactions are currency, where outrage feeds the spectacle, where humiliation is not accidental but carefully staged, timed, and delivered in front of witnesses who are meant to remember who holds power. I didn't understand that at first. I only knew that I was being tested in ways that felt personal but were never really about me. That day wasn't the first slight. It was simply the first one that was public enough to demand a performance from me. And everyone there assumed they knew which role I would play. It started subtly, as these things always do. A comment that sounded like a joke, but landed with intent. A correction that didn't need to be made, delivered just loudly enough for others to hear. Each moment was small on its own, deniable if questioned, forgettable if isolated. But together, they formed a pattern. And patterns don't lie. I noticed how often my contributions were reframed as naive. How my restraint was translated into incompetence. How credit traveled away from me without resistance because I rarely chased it. I had mistaken that environment for neutral ground. In reality, it was a quiet competition where volume and confidence were mistaken for truth. The person who eventually humiliated me understood this game well. They knew how to create momentum, how to seed doubt before delivering a public blow. By the time it happened, the room was already primed to see me as smaller than I was. When the moment arrived, it wasn't explosive. It was surgical. A story told with just enough truth to sound credible and just enough distortion to make me look reckless. Laughter followed, not cruel, but complicit. That kind of laughter hurts more because it pretends innocence. I remember the split second when my body prepared to respond. Heart racing, breath tightening, mind assembling explanations at impossible speed. I could have corrected every false assumption. I could have dismantled the narrative piece by piece. I could have exposed their insecurity in front of everyone. But I also saw something else. I saw how ready they were for my reaction. How my defense would complete their performance. How my anger would justify their framing. How my emotional response would be replayed later as proof that I was unstable, defensive, difficult. So I stopped. I let the silence stretch. Not dramatically. Not as a statement. Just long enough for the energy in the room to lose its direction. Long enough for their confidence to have nowhere to land. They kept going, mistaking my stillness for defeat. Each additional comment made them bolder, sharper, more careless. Humiliation, when it isn't met with resistance, tends to overreach. People reveal more than they intend when they think they're safe. I watched as the tone shifted from witty to excessive, from pointed to unnecessary. The room noticed too, though no one said anything. That was the moment the balance began to tilt back, quietly, invisibly. What they didn't know was that I had already decided something internally. I wasn't going to win this moment. I was going to outlast it. I was going to let their version of me exist uncontested long enough for reality to contradict it on its own. Over the following weeks, I changed nothing about my demeanor. I didn't withdraw. I didn't perform competence to compensate. I simply became precise, measured, unavailable for drama. I documented instead of debating. I observed instead of confronting. And slowly, something strange happened. People began to notice the gap between the story that had been told about me and the consistency of my actions. The aggressor, sensing the shift, tried to provoke another reaction. Subtle jabs returned. Then sharper ones. Each attempt landed weaker than the last because the audience had changed. Power, I learned, is fragile when it depends on someone else's emotional participation. The more I refused to give them that participation, the more they had to escalate to maintain their position. And escalation is where mistakes happen. Details slip. Contradictions emerge. Alliances fracture. I didn't expose them. I didn't need to. Their behavior did that work for me. By the time the narrative collapsed, no announcement was made. No apology followed. Authorities simply moved away from them and back toward me, piece by piece. Conversations changed tone. Decisions stopped bypassing me. The same people who had laughed began seeking my input privately, cautiously, as if unsure when the shift had occurred. Humiliation is meant to be final. It's designed to lock you into a diminished role. What no one tells you is that its effectiveness depends entirely on timing and response. React too fast, and you confirm it. React too loud, and you extend it. Sometimes the most destabilizing move is to let it echo unanswered until it collapses under its own weight. There were nights I replayed that moment, wondering if silence had cost me something intangible, if a boundary had gone undefended, if self-respect required noise. But each time doubt surfaced, I measured it against the outcome, against the quiet authority that followed, against the fact that no one dared try it again. They had taken something from me in public, but in doing so, they had revealed exactly how they operated. And that knowledge was far more valuable than immediate vindication. What lingered after wasn't triumph. It was clarity. I began to understand how often humiliation is used as a shortcut to control. How it relies on witnesses more than targets. How dignity, when withheld strategically, becomes unsettling to those who depend on dominance displays to feel secure. I also understood the cost. Winning quietly means no applause. No clear moment where the scales visibly tip. It requires trusting that time will do what emotion cannot. It means carrying the discomfort of being misunderstood longer than feels fair. But it also creates a different kind of strength. One that doesn't announce itself. One that doesn't need consensus to exist. I stopped seeing that moment as something that happened to me. I saw it as an invitation I declined. An offer to play a role that would have limited me if I'd accepted. In choosing restraint, I didn't become passive. I became unpredictable in a way that made manipulation difficult. They never knew which version of me they were dealing with anymore, because I wasn't reacting from the place they expected. That's when I realized something unsettling. Many people don't fear confrontation. They fear calm. Because calm can't be steered. It doesn't rush to fill silence. It doesn't explain itself into smaller and smaller corners. It waits. And waiting changes the rules. They thought humiliation would define me. Instead, it defined them. Not through revenge or exposure, but through the slow erosion of credibility that follows unchecked behavior. So I'll leave you with this question. When someone tries to take your power publicly, is the strongest move always to take it back immediately? Or is there a version of strength that waits, watches, and lets the truth arrive on its own terms? If this story stirred something familiar, sit with it. Share your thoughts below. And if you want more reflections like this, you know where to find them.